Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are going to completely rethink everything you know about motion and classical physics today. If you've ever taken a basic science class, you are intimately familiar with Isaac Newton and his three laws of motion, right? I mean, they are the absolute bedrock of how we understand the physical world around us. But what if those laws aren't the fundamental rules of the universe? What if they're actually just surface-level symptoms of something much, much deeper? Today, we're digging into some groundbreaking source material that derives Newton's laws entirely from Rehan's unifying MEE equation. Get ready because we are about to view classical mechanics through a purely electromagnetic lens. So let's jump right into the foundational concept that makes all of this possible: mandatory electromagnetic equilibrium, or MEE. In Rehan's framework, MEE is the absolute boss. It's the fundamental rule of reality. It dictates that our physical universe is constantly, dynamically balancing complex electromagnetic fields at every conceivable scale. Whether you're looking at a single tiny particle or a massive planet, this unifying equation is relentlessly enforcing equilibrium. That means there are no completely isolated mechanical events. There's really just this constant, beautiful balancing act of electromagnetic fields. To see how dramatically this reframes reality, check out this idea regarding Law 9 from the source material. It asks us to visualize atoms simply as magnetic balls. Think about what that actually means. Every single physical touch, every push, every heavy box you lift, things you've always thought of as purely mechanical actions, they're actually massive, complex magnetic interactions. You aren't really touching anything in the traditional sense. You're experiencing the collective electromagnetic behavior of countless atoms pushing back against your own. Mind-blowing, right? To make sense of this massive paradigm shift, we're going to systematically translate Newton's three classic laws through this new framework. We'll lay out the MEE framework itself, redefine inertia, figure out what force actually is, explore mutual action, and finally, look at where the macroscopic limits of this theory kick in. All right, let's start with the basics. How does the MEE framework actually explain everyday reality? The crucial takeaway is that what we perceive as everyday macro-level mechanical movement is fundamentally an emergent, collective electromagnetic behavior. When you integrate the MEE equation over macroscopic volumes, like a baseball flying through the air, a car driving down the street, or even your own body, you're looking at millions upon millions of atoms. The physical mechanics we see with our naked eye are just the macro-level result of all those tiny, complex electromagnetic fields dynamically finding their balance.
Okay, so how does this change Newton's first law? Let's talk about inertial equilibrium.
This comparison hits the nail on the head. In the classical Newtonian view, an object at rest simply stays at rest unless a force acts upon it. It's a behavioral observation, plain and simple. But Rehan's unifying equation gives us the mathematical why. It sees a macroscopic resting body as a collection of atoms in perfect internal equilibrium. The total integrated imbalance of the system is exactly zero. Because there's zero imbalance, there's no net restorative force required by the MEE equation. The object isn't just lazily resting, it is existing in perfect electromagnetic harmony. But what about an object that's already moving? Well, uniform motion isn't just coasting through space either. According to the source, uniform velocity corresponds to steady helical or spiral field configurations. Constant motion maintains phase gradients so perfectly that all terms balance out without needing any acceleration. So inertia is simply the persistence of this EM equilibrium. As long as no external magnetic gradients disturb the party, the body maintains its velocity, just to keep its internal fields happy.
Now, let's tackle the second law, the famous F equals ma. We're about to redefine force entirely. Notice how force is no longer just this arbitrary push or pull acting on a mass. Under the MME framework, macroscopic force density arises specifically as a restorative response to a deviation in equilibrium. If an external field messes with an object's perfect electromagnetic balance, the object doesn't just passively accept a force. No, the universe actively generates a restorative response to fix the MME deviation. Think of it as a three-step chain reaction. Step 1, an external disturbance, like the fields from another body, creates a local MEE imbalance. Step 2, the unifying equation's restorative term kicks into high gear, driving currents and adjusting fields. Step 3, this results in a net momentum transfer to restore equilibrium, which we visually perceive as acceleration. So acceleration is literally just the rate of change needed to rebalance the system's phase gradients. Because of this, a body's mass and rigidity aren't just static, boring properties. They actually emerge from its total EM self-energy. When you integrate the force density over the volume of a body, the phase oscillations at the quantum level average out to create effective rigidity. What we feel as a solid, heavy mass is basically just the collective oscillation energy of the object, resisting changes to its electromagnetic state.
Moving right along, let's dive into the third law, action and reaction. Newton told us that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But again, Rion's MEE framework explains the underlying mechanics. Because the total integrated imbalance of the universe must be conserved globally, any action at a distance via fields has to be reciprocal. If the field of body A perturbs the MEE of body B, it creates a restorative force. By the pure mathematical symmetry of the unifying equation, that perturbation guarantees a perfectly reciprocal restorative force back on body A.
When you look at the math broken down into its system components, it is a perfectly balanced ledger. When body A and body B perturb one another, the EM momentum doesn't just vanish into thin air. It is conserved in the fields themselves, specifically represented by something called the pointing vector. This ensures that any momentum given to body B is balanced by an equal and opposite momentum to body A, plus any momentum changes within the field itself. It's an airtight balance guaranteed by the framework. Tying this all back to Law 9 from earlier, this means that all physical impacts are essentially soft collisions between repelling same-pole magnets. When two objects hit each other, their atomic magnetic fields repel one another, transmitting the force coherently across the bodies and ensuring equal and opposite impulses. There's absolutely no hard mechanical crashing. It's a seamless, globally conserved magnetic repulsion.
Finally, let's talk about the boundaries of this theory. Where are the limits of this macroscopic world? We need to be clear that these exact derivations, where Newton's laws map perfectly onto the MEE equation, only hold up in a specific regime. We are talking about macroscopic, low-speed environments where fields are quasi-static. This is the non-relativistic limit, where radiation losses can be ignored, and the many-body EM equilibria dominate because those quantum oscillations have smoothed out into what we feel as solid matter. Because if you zoom in way too far, down to the subatomic scale, this classical smoothing falls apart completely. You lose these neat, predictable classical trajectories. Instead, dynamic orbits and quantum-like phase effects completely dominate the environment. Now, the fundamental MEE equation still applies for sure, but it no longer neatly outputs Newton's simple laws of motion. So what's the grand takeaway from this explainer? It's a complete paradigm shift. Newton's laws are incredibly useful, obviously, but they are ultimately just effective emergent descriptions of a much deeper reality. Rion's unifying equation provides the fundamental why behind inertia, the true nature of force, and the reason for mechanical reciprocity. It completely validates the incredible claim that all gross mechanical effects you experience daily are, at their core, magnetic behaviors. But exploring this source material leaves us with one massive, mind-bending mystery. If inertia, force, and physical impacts are entirely driven by the mandatory balancing of electromagnetic fields, could gravity simply be a residual, higher-order electromagnetic effect waiting to be fully solved by this exact same equation? The source hints that it might just be an equilibrium curvature we haven't fully mapped out yet. I'll leave you to ponder that as you look at the physical world around you today. Maybe don't see it as a mechanical machine anymore, but rather as a sea of perfectly balanced magnets.